Hi, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting with another in our long-running series about the example projects, both Decision Service in 2024 and the Oracle Policy Modeling projects, which we reviewed in 2022 and 2023. This week, we're going to be looking at a decision service called URL. It is a very simple decision service, but it demonstrates very well a particular use case for decision services when used in combination with Oracle Policy Modeling projects. In fact, in the online documentation, we'll notice that there's a link where it describes using this particular decision service with an existing example Oracle Policy Model called Know Your Customer. So I'm going to go and download Oracle Policy Modeling project Know Your Customer, first of all, and then I'm also going to download the URL JSON file for the decision service. Put that on the desktop too, there we go. Now that I've downloaded these two, let's take a moment to import the decision service, fire up the Oracle Policy Modeling project, and dig into the use case that we're trying to see. Go into Projects, Actions, and click Import, and go ahead and grab your JSON file that you just always make sure when you're doing these kind of demo imports that you place them in a workspace that you don't get in anyone's way. And I always include a prefix in the front of the project name, so if someone else imports it as for their learning, we don't end up getting in each other's way. Let's import the project right away. We can see that the project in the contract has no inputs and one output, the output being a URL. Now, of course, this is only one URL. We can imagine a situation where this project could output multiple URLs. But we can see that the idea here is to provide, through a decision service, access to this URL. Now, obviously, you're thinking, well, why couldn't I just do that in Oracle Policy Modeling? The answer is you could, but let's assume two things. One, that the URL changes frequently, in which case do you really want to be going back into Oracle Policy Modeling and changing, redeploying for something that isn't actually a rule change, it's just a reference data change. And that's one of the use cases for decision services today, is to serve as a repository for reference data that can be updated quickly. The second scenario is, imagine if you have multiple policy modeling projects that all need to have this URL in there somewhere. Well, obviously, having one decision service which is connected to multiple Oracle Policy Modeling projects is way more efficient than simply having the same rule but in multiple different projects. So if the URL changed, you'd have to go in and modify multiple projects. Clearly, this is a win. So let's go into Oracle Policy Modeling and let's open up the zip file that we downloaded a minute ago. A lot of people don't necessarily know this. You don't have to unzip a zip file that you've got with a project in it. You can just go into Policy Modeling, click Open Project, and then select Project Zip Files here. And when you select the project zip file, OPM will take care of putting it in the right folder, giving it a name, and so on. There you go. So it's going to open this. It's going to put it in the usual place, and I'm going to click Open. So I didn't have to unzip the file myself. The Know Your Customer, which is originally from the insurance and banking world, the idea is quite simple. You are welcomed and then you are told to provide where the customer is from, get various pieces of information from the customer about what business they do, have they had any company names that have changed, and where they have their fiscal residences, and then the onboarding is complete. And so far, so good. If we go into the Data tab, we notice that there's an attribute called the Intelligent Advisor web page. And this comes from the decision service. So if we wanted to include, for example, the URL somewhere in our interview, well, why don't we put in here? So there we have our little dynamic URL. I'm not going to format it so we can see the URL in the text. And obviously, the URL that is this comes from the decision service. So before we finish, we need to go to the Rules tab. There is already a reference, but given that I changed the name of the reference when I imported it into my hub, the name that is currently listed in there is wrong. So I would need to go to my own named version. and you will see that it maps out to this Intelligent Advisor web page attribute that we saw previously. Good piece of advice, incidentally, is when you're working with these, change the name so that you can remember what you called it in your decision service. So now we can go ahead and debug. We can go through, and when we reach the end of the interview, we can see that the label I put in, just so we could see the URL, we can actually check that the URL has come through from the decision service. If I return to the decision service, and let's imagine that the URL has changed for whatever reason, and I commit those changes, and I reset and do it again, and we can see at the end of the interview now we have the other URL. So the reference data has been pulled in, irrespective of the fact that the rules haven't changed, but that piece of reference data has been pulled into the Oracle Policy Modeling project, which is a fairly typical decision service use case. Obviously not usually just for one URL, but storing that kind of static data in a decision service and bringing it in through a reference is a very, very useful technique indeed. I hope you enjoyed this demo. See you again for another one soon.